quiet power. Today is for all of the sensitive souls out there, myself included, who have been told at some point in their lives or throughout their lives that they're too quiet and asked to speak up. Quite often, that request is coming from someone who is almost barking it at us and supporting their own voices in a very inefficient way. What if you could maintain your quiet presence while being seen and heard and felt and understood? You can. First, I want to start by saying you are needed. Your quiet presence is very needed in this world. So today is not about changing you into someone else. It's not about making you into a loud person or a boisterous person or an extroverted person. It is not about trying to make you someone you're not or ask you to show up in a way that feels like it isn't you. It is about expanding the resonance of the real you so that you can be seen and heard and felt and understood, and possibly increase your impact in the world if that's something that you want. The first thing that I want to share is to use air as the fuel that powers your voice across a room, instead of using muscles in the throat to power our voices across the room. My good friend Alexis Ryan Melcher has said that we're often taught to raise our volume in order to be heard. And what I'm asking is that you increase the volume of your torso to take in more air so that you can be heard. Try that. Inhale, and then go ahead and speak and notice how far across the room your voice goes. Play with it. Get curious. The second thing that I want to ask you to do is to give yourself permission to be seen and heard and felt. Almost to take back the permission that at some point in your life may have been taken away from you. We're raised in a world that often is telling us subconsciously or consciously, don't be too big, don't be too much, don't take up too much space. And if we're on the quieter end of the spectrum and we heard those messages, we've trained ourselves not to take up any space. And most of the Western world has trained ourselves not to support our voices with air. Some of us can get away with it, and others of us cannot. Giving yourself permission sometimes is a little easier if we connect to some sort of why. Why would I be taking up this space that I'm giving myself permission to take up? Setting some sort of an intention to honor a value, to bring our quiet power into the space that needs it, to spread more love, like I mentioned yesterday, being an instrument of love with our voices. Something like that might make it a little bit easier to really fully give ourselves that permission to energize the whole space, to allow our voices to ring out. And then the last thing I want to ask you to do is to take it one breath at a time. Be compassionate with yourself, giving ourselves permission to be seen and heard and felt. For some of us, if we haven't had that permission since sometime in our childhood, it can feel uncomfortable to be seen or heard or felt or hear our voices ringing out in a space in an open, air-fueled way. It can feel uncomfortable or even dangerous to some of us. So find your compassionate edge. Stretch your comfort zone by 10% or an inch, one little inch at a time, so that you're taking back the reins and deciding how much to let your energy radiate out in a space, how much to let your volume radiate out in a space, and then increase it with that nourishing breath by expanding your energy bit by bit, day by day, to give yourself time to be comfortable with being seen and heard and felt. It is very, very, very possible to do this. One example that I have is back before everything was mic'd, actors used to do love scenes in 500-seat or more theaters without microphones. They were not shouting their love scenes at each other. They were speaking in a very tender way, while allowing themselves to be seen and heard and felt by all 500 people in that audience. They supported their bodies with breath and then allowed it to ring out with that kind of quiet tenderness that is very similar to the quiet power and being yourself, your quiet, powerful self, and yet someone on the other side of the room will be able to hear you and feel you and understand what you're saying.